Scott just made the point.
Jefferson used to be a lot more secure, not just.
Well, it looks like another historic first for President Barack Obama. America's first black president is not only the champion golfer. When I say champion golfer, I don't mean he's better golfer than all the rest of the presidents, only that he spends more time working and playing golf than any of the others. But he's also set another economic record. Just before his election, Barack Obama helpfully reminded us that he doesn't look like those other presidents. And as it turns out, he doesn't perform like them either. Because following a Drudge Report link, we find that Barack Obama has once again eclipsed all of his predecessors with another historic first. Even by dropping the catastrophic numbers for 2009, he has the lowest average first quarter GDP growth of any president on record. Those records beginning in 1947. In all first quarters since 1947, the average GDP growth, was 4.0%. Presidential history, again, dropping the catastrophic 2009 numbers as unfairly belonging to his predecessors. Well, president history has an average of 0.4%. President Obama has precisely one-tenth of the average economic growth in first quarter since 1947. So let's bring in Steve Green and Scott Ott to hail and adore the light worker, shall we? Gentlemen, he was the one. He was the Messiah, the unicorn who would gain us respect in the world and bring economic order to the cowboy capitalist excesses of the stupid guy and all those other slaveholders like Reagan and Clinton and Eisenhower and Johnson and all the rest. And the smartest man to ever sit in the Oval Office has, over 6 years now, produced one-tenth the average economic growth of presidents dating back to Truman, maybe earlier. We just don't keep records that far. Now, Scott, you're a former newspaper fellow, but we don't hold that against you. I keep standing at a newsstand waiting for the latest edition of the New York Times, and so far, no news of this monumental achievement which affects every single American, but surely any day now, right?
Well, Bill, because you are a right-wing wacko talk show host, when you brought this up, I didn't believe you. And so I went to the New York Times and actually did a search on this. And the New York Times actually has an article about the fact that the first quarter GDP contracted, I believe it was 0.7%. And so I then read this rather long article explaining that the economy had contracted in the first quarter of this year. And all I was really looking for was how they connected that with the President of the United States, who is, of course, celebrated when things go well. Oddly enough, the name Obama does not appear at all in a story that I would estimate to be around 1,000 words or more. So then I went into the New York Times database, so to speak. I searched the New York Times website to see what else I could find out about this phenomenon. And it turns out a week before this story that the first quarter GDP had contracted, there was an article on how mystified so many people are that first quarter GDP tends to not be as strong as people would expect it should be. So literally a week before the story that the first quarter GDP had contracted was a story setting us up for the possibility that first quarter GDP might be weak and that this might be something beyond anyone's control. Now, the Federal Reserve apparently thinks that the numbers that the government is using are fairly accurate, and they're not concerned about the accuracy of the figures, but there are others who are concerned that maybe we're not measuring first quarter GDP correctly. So, no, there was no story about the overall average for President Obama, but they did soften the blow of the new numbers.
Another historic first then for President Obama, ladies and gentlemen. He will be the first president in U.S. history to be graded on the curve. And that's certainly something that we can all be very, very proud of. Very proud of indeed.
Yeah.
How are we going to measure your success against these awful numbers? We'll compare them to your previous awful numbers. Love it. If everybody gets an F, then everybody gets an A in America. That's how it works. You know, Steve, you have a couple of young children. Are you afraid, as I am, that this one-tenth effort on the part of President Obama is something that is going to haunt your children? You know, the President golf cart is setting up a new normal for your kids. You know, a coming age where 1% Q1 economic growth is heralded as an incredible achievement because, Steve Green, right now, over 6 years with this clown, it would be an incredible achievement.
Yeah, it sure would, wouldn't it? Yeah, the fact is, we don't actually know what the numbers are. Because what the BLS tries to do is to even out the fact that the economy doesn't go in a straight line either up or down. But there's a lot of this. There's a lot of noise in the data. And so they do these seasonal adjustments to try and even out those things. But nobody knows how good the seasonal adjustments are anymore because the economy is so out of whack, and it has been for so very long. You know, the Fed's upped its balance sheet, I think something over $4 trillion now, just pumping that cash into the economy, where instead of spinning around and creating growth, it just sits there because we've got bankers afraid to lend anything out because of Dodd-Frank. You've got borrowers afraid to borrow anything because of this dismal growth, and so nobody knows what the real numbers are. But on a broader picture, I think you're looking at this all wrong. You know, JFK said that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that's a beautiful thing about a growing economy. You know, wealth papers over a lot of differences. We don't have riots in Baltimore when the economy's doing great. You know, we don't have all these tensions when everybody's out there being happy, spending their money and doing great at their job and seeing their paychecks increase. We don't have time for all that. We're too busy enjoying this great economy. We didn't see any of that in the 90s. We didn't see any of that in the 80s. They were really good times. But if your goal is to divide and rule, you don't want that tide to rise. No. You want the tide to just sit there. You want the water to get stagnant so that you and your crony capitalist buddies and your fellow progressives in Washington, D.C. get to ladle out the stagnant water to people who are grateful because that's all they can get.
Perfectly said, as usual. You know, my friends, we have another year and a half of this ahead of us. Barack Obama, at his worst, is absolutely appalling. But when he's at his best, well, then he's merely mind-numbingly disappointing. Shepard Fairey was the artist who did the iconic Hope posters that were so prevalent in 2008. When recently asked if Barack Obama had lived up to the aspirations in his Hope poster, Fairey replied, "Not even close." So I think that should be the poster of the coming years. I think there should be a new Obama poster out, and the poster should be the same treatment of Barack Obama, and the letters for the age are "not even close." I think we ought to paste them everywhere. Not even close. Not even close. Economically, in terms of foreign policy, the Obamacare debacle, and frankly, folks, just in the ability to show up in person for the most powerful office in the world. Does he do anything? Is he in the Oval Office right now? Can anyone tell? Does it matter? Nope. This is the historical presidency? Not even close. For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle.